Hey guys, National Master Sean Lei here, back at it again with part 3 of our series on the Scotch Gambit. Today, we're going to be going through some of the lines that we haven't yet covered yet in the previous 2 lessons of the more common lines that can happen in the Scotch Gambit. In future Scotch Gambits videos, we will be going more through game analysis and through different variations that we've already gone through, but more in depth. So as we know in previous episodes, the Scotch Gambit begins with a powerful e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, and bishop c4. Again, if you guys haven't watched the series, I highly do recommend so far as we went through some of the most common lines, but today we'll be going through specifically the bishop c5 variation. So, before we've gone through bishop e4 check and how that can lead to very dynamic positions for us as white and allows us to get very active, very strong pieces in the center attacking our opponent's king. We also went through bishop c7 and how that's not very good because after c3 and this pawn either captures, in which we play queen d5, checkmating the opponent, or they let us just capture back in the center, giving us a strong center. That's not really a variation we should be worried about. In the second part of the series, we learned about knight f6 and how after knight e6, e5 is best played, and how most of our opponents are going to make a mistake by moving the knight to one of the squares highlighted there, when in reality d5 is best. However, in that video, we also went through why d5 is the best of variation for black, but how even if black plays that, white can get a very strong game by either attacking on the king side or attacking on the queen side, depending on the plan you want to follow. So bishop c5 is probably the third most, or maybe even the second most common variation in the Scotch Gambit. And as I said in previous videos, no matter where your opponent moves his bishop, except for a3 of course, you kind of just play c3. But for each variation, it's very different. Here the idea is if your opponent captures here, you have this very slick bishop takes f7 move. And after king captures, I want you guys to pause your videos and think for a second what you guys think the best move here for white is. Why did we sacrifice a bishop for a pawn? Is it just to lure the king out? Perhaps it's to start an attack with knight g5? Hope you guys pause your videos. And if you guys did, I hope you guys found queen d5 check. Just saying, I'm going to recapture the pawn. And after all this, as you can see, we don't really have any long-term weaknesses. We have the center, we have more development because we have the king over here, and a queen over here, and not only that, our opponent's king is in the center. Now, of course, this isn't quite winning for white, but if you check the engine, as you can see, it's plus 0.5 for proper play by black. And so play can happen like here, probably bishop g4, and after like capture. Even though this variation seems very drawish according to the engine, white has very fun play and very much more active play because his pieces are more out and more towards the center. So you don't really need to be scared of this variation. How I would play is probably just castle queenside if your opponent trades queens. But a lot of the opponents that I've played against, they just develop normally. But after developing normally, there comes problems for black because as you can see, his pieces are quite cramped. And after moves like b3, bishop b2, castle log, how is black going to get his king safe? Perhaps king f7, but after king f7, we have this threat, this knight check. And if he plays h6, there are a lot of problems coming black's way if black doesn't try to trade the queens. So that's basically what you do with bishop c5, and they capture on c3 immediately. However, this isn't the only move. So if you guys have played Gioco Piano, which I believe many of you guys do, the Gioco Piano is basically, or the Italian game is basically this. I'm sure you guys have seen variations in which white plays c3, black plays knight f6, d4, capture, bishop checks, knight c3, knight captures, and just castles in these variations. And after capture, d5, bishop d3, this is what we call, I believe, the old classical line, because this was a line that many grandmasters or very strong players played back in the line before people stop because, as you can see here, there's not much play for either side, and it gets quite boring. As you check the engine over here, it's slightly better for white. In fact, it's just slightly better for black at this point, right? And so people didn't really like playing these variations. However, it is still a very strong variation because even though the engine says it's slightly better for black or that it's slightly equal, there's still lots of play in these variations because white gets this semi-open file here. White gets this open file on the E file. White has two bishops. Black has a strong knight. And so there's play on both sides here. So why am I telling you about this variation over here? The reason why I'm telling you this is because after pawn takes, bishop c4 and bishop c5, c3, the opponent can transpose with knight to f6. And the idea is after knight to f6, if we just capture here and bishop check, as you can see, we get the same variation as stated before, right? It's the exact same thing. However, if you guys don't like that O line, you do not have to play it, as you can play this e4 variation. However, as you will see, it becomes very like a variation that we learned before. So after bishop here, the knight has to move. It probably goes over there. We probably capture there, and bishop b4 check is probably what I recommend for black, because after knight bd2, all these trades could happen. And in the end, if black decides to trade all these pieces out, as you can see through the engine analysis on the top right, white is actually doing quite fine. In fact, I would prefer white here like 10 times out of 10 because this bishop is very strong compared to the counterpart on c8. The bishop can go to d3, attacking h7 in the future if black castles. We can play knight g5, white can castle, f4, rook f3, rook h3. Very simple ideas in which we just try to blow up our opponent's position. What is black trying to do? Generally, black tries to go for c5 in these variations, but as you can see, c5 is not possible because this knight's blocking the way and the bishop is kind of gone. So it's actually quite difficult for black to play in these variations, and I would definitely recommend white. So this is why after bishop c5, I do not recommend after the knight f6 variation to just capture over here, because that goes into the Joko piano variations, but just play e5, because as we said in the second video, if the knight decides to go anywhere here, it's actually quite bad. And if our opponent plays d5, in this variation, it's just slightly worse than the main line, because after stuff like this, we just get strong pieces compared to our counterparts. We can even pile up on the c file if we really want to and take advantage there. Though that's not really part of our plan. Maybe rook c3 and do a rook lift this way. It's just, you have a lot of things that you can do. So, bishop c5, it's very important for you guys to understand what to play. c3 as always, if your opponent moves the bishop, and what to do if capture or knight f6. Now there is this other variation in which a lot of players seem to like at this point, which I never quite understood, which was just d3. You could ignore the pawn, but I just recommend just taking with the queen. I mean, your opponent gave back your pawn and he just lets you develop your queen. Sure, you don't get a massive advantage like before, but your opponent still has the problems that he had encountered before, right? Knight f6 isn't really good because of e5, and now it is questionable whether or not this knight wants to go anywhere. And if like d5 is not that strong, I would say, because this bishop can go to b5 over here now. And it's just similar variations as before, except now we have a queen on d3. This d3 move tries to stop white from gaining a lot of tempo, but in reality it doesn't really do much because black wasted a tempo for white to develop the queen. If knight e7, we still have this idea in which if he castles, right? Even though we don't have queen h4 ideas, we can still play moves like queen h3 and just go for huge threats against our opponent's king. Nothing much to worry about d3. And if your opponent just plays a move like, I don't know, d6, again, like most variations that I've showed you before, if white just gets a massive center for basically nothing from black, you should always take it, because here your opponent really has nothing. Now knight f6, you don't even have to play the castle variations, though castling is still very strong here. You could just play a move like bishop d3, or just queen c2 or queen e2, and just defend your pawn, right? And just slowly build up against your opponent's lack of space over here. So this a basic run through of the Bishop C5 variation. I've encountered it a couple times in my own games, though nothing of much to note. Black doesn't really try to do anything, just tries to play a normal game. But if you know what you're doing, life will be much better for white. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to check out the rest of the Scotch Gambit series for a complete overview. And in future episodes, as I said before, we'll be going through some of my own games and some of my some Grandmaster games that have been played in the Scotch Gambit. So you guys can perfect this opening, do very well. And I hope to see you guys in a future chess video. This is Sean Lei, signing